Right, Mike, you're on camera.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this ordinary council meeting of Norfolk Island Regional Council, taking place on the 3rd of November 2021. I'll ask the General Manager to recite the statement of respect. So would everybody be upstanding, please? And at the end of the statement of respect, please remain upstanding while we deal with condolences. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Interim Administrator. The Norfolk Island Regional Council promotes a climate of respect for all. We'll endeavour to inspire in our community shared civic pride by valuing and protecting our unique culture and environment, both natural and built for the current generations. We, the Interim Administrator and staff of the Norfolk Island Regional Council, undertake to act with honesty and integrity, to conduct ourselves in a way that engenders trust and confidence in the decisions we make and the actions we take on behalf of the Norfolk Island community. We acknowledge the Norfolk Island people, the traditional custodians of this island.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Please remain standing. I've received a notice of condolence in relation to Margaret or Maggie Cynthia Bergagnan, who died on the 7th of October 2021 and for whom we will observe a few moments of silence. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Mr. General Manager, for the record, are there any apologies?
No, there is not.
Thank you. And for the record, are there any disclosures of interest?
And there's no disclosures of interest.
Then I'll move to item 5.1 of the business paper. 5.1 comprises the minutes of the council meeting held on the 6th of October 2021. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Interim Administrator. Before you is a account of the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of October, and they are presented as a true and accurate record of that meeting.
Thank you. I have personally checked the minutes of the council meeting held on the 6th of October, and I resolve that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 6th of October 2021 be received, taken as read and confirmed. And I'll move to item 5.2, which is the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 19th of October 2021. Mr. General Manager.
Again, Mr. Interim Administrator, the minutes are before you for the extraordinary meeting held on the 19th of October, which are a true and accurate record.
Thank you. I have personally reviewed and checked the minutes, and I resolve that the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 22nd of October 2021 be received and the recommendations therein be adopted. And I'll move to item 6, which is a public access session. For the record, Mr. General Manager, have there been any requests for public access?
There's been no request this month.
Thank you. And I note at item 7, there's no administrator's minute. At item 8, there are no reports from committees. And at item 9, there are no reports from the General Manager. So I will move to item 10, which is the reports from the Manager Corporate and Finance, the first of which is item 10.1, a report on transition to sustainability information technology. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Interim Administrator. Before you is a report that details a number of savings that have been identified recently through a review of our ICT platform. The report goes into a fair bit of detail, but it provides a significant first step, and I say that this is one of many steps that's required for the ICT review platform, and will be improved significantly once we move from Kingston to Burnt Pine into the new building, where we will have more centralised services instead of it being spread out across the island. But the discussion is based primarily around Microsoft improvements and heading towards cloud-first strategy. The report shows potential savings of $337,000 in the first 12 months of changes that we're looking to implement. And then there's also some significant savings around hardware, where we've found an awful lot of duplication of services that have been done online, and we also need to upgrade some of the hardware that has been talked about for a while. But what we're doing here is just an information update for you to show that we're taking significant steps in trying to improve our ICT platform. And we put before you some recommendations of a number of steps that were identified in external audit findings, but have now been materialised through this report. And as I said, this is first step of many that are required to improve our ICT delivery.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. I only have one question in relation to our ICT platforms, and that is with the intended move from Kingston to Burnt Pine. Do we expect the IT infrastructure to be in place in time for completion of the facilities, which I understand are due to be completed in March?
Yes, we do. That's the timetable we're working towards, that when we do move into the renovated old building, new building, everything will be live at that point.
Thank you. I resolve that Council 1 embark on migration of shared data to SharePoint, OneDrive and Microsoft Teams. 2, move to an Azure Active Directory tenancy and remove the need for this requirement on site. 3, configure EMS, Enterprise Mobility and Security. And 4, transition Civica CM9 to Altitude Software as a Service or SaaS platform. And I'll move now to item 10.2, which is the investment report September 2021. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Interim Administrator. I'll ask the Manager of Corporate Finance to address his report.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. The investment report for September 2021 is to provide an overview of Council's cash position as at 30 September 2021. As at that date, Council had total cash of just over $6.21 million, of which 4.6 was in deposits and 1.6 was sitting in cash at bank. Restricted cash, Council had $4.83 million worth of restricted cash, and giving us an unrestricted position of just over $1.38 million. Council also holds in trust $704,000. The estimated cash position at the end of the financial year is just over 4.7 million. And this represents about approximately 59% of the 8 million target of working capital that was recommended in the external audit reports. The estimated unrestricted funds, 1.38 million, as at 30 September 21, has decreased by just over 3 million from the estimate reported in the 31st of August investment report. This decrease in cash was attributable to 4 principal areas. The payment of $596,000 as part of the Norfolk Island COVID Business Sustainability Funding. Council will be reimbursed these funds by the Australian Government. There were some timing differences in terms of when some cash would be received, notably 876,000 from the BBRF, Building Better Regions funding associated with the 3G, 4G project, which we expect to be receiving shortly, next 2 weeks. We've also recognised an additional 969,000 in restricted funds that were received in the previous financial year. These funds were again received from the Australian government for the COVID stimulus projects being administered by council. There are also various timing differences with the liquor bond stock and freight costs, approximately 500,000, which were due for payment. So while the estimated unrestricted funds is lower than anticipated, it should be noted, as I've previously advised Mr. Interim Administrator, that the estimated cash at year-end will be 59% of the target. Our cash position will considerably improve during October and November as invoices have been raised for the second financial assistance grant instalment, which is just under 3 million, and invoicing for the service delivery agreement with the Commonwealth, just over 1 million, and also reimbursement, as I mentioned previously, of the COVID business sustainability grants. I've noted in the report 596,000. That was the total that had been spent as at the end of September. However, the invoice will be for the full amount that was allocated, just over $1 million. That's the investment report, Mr. Interim Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Innes-Walker. I understand that there may also have been a contribution to the reduction in the current unrestricted cash balance as at 30 September due to late dispatch of telecom and electricity accounts. If that is the case, could you give me some indication of what that late dispatch may have contributed to reducing the unrestricted cash balance at 30 September, sorry.
Apart from the normal late payers, the general ledger is understated. The cash position we have been receiving, the cash, some of the electricity invoices went out later than normal, which also delayed collection of cash for those. So in terms of the total dollar value, we're talking about it's somewhere between $500,000 and $700,000.
Thank you. But you are assuring me in this report that by 30 June 2022, we will still be on track to have an unrestricted cash balance of $4.7 million, if I understand it correctly.
That's correct, Mr. Interim Administrator, based on current forecasts as at 30 September 2021. This will be discussed a bit further in the next paper regarding the review of the budget, the Q1 review.
Thank you. I resolve that Council notes the investment report for September 2021, and I'll move to item 10.3, which is a report on the quarterly budget review statement as at 30 September 2021. Mr. General Manager.
Interim Administrator, I'll hand this across to the Manager of Corporate Finance to give you a rundown of his quarterly QBR number 1.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. The quarterly budget review statement presents a summary of Council's financial position for the first 3 months from 1 July 21 to 30 September 21 of the 21-22 financial year. The statement of financial performance as at 30 September forecasts projected council surplus for the 21-22 financial year of just under 500,000, 497,225, against the budgeted surplus of 500,000. There have not been any significant changes in the assumptions on which the income receipts and spending patterns were forecast in the budget. The Q2 statement, which will be presented to Council in January, will provide a more indicative result as additional data becomes available and initiatives associated with the Council's transition to sustainability strategy are finalised and implemented. Capital expenditure for 2020-21 is forecast to be $8,286,612. The original budget was $7,187,851. The material amendments to the capital budget are, firstly, the council was unsuccessful in its application for funding for a water assurance scheme, just under 1.5 million. As this project was externally funded, there was no impact, or was to be externally funded through government grants. There was no impact on the council's cash commitments. Council is also receiving 1.474 million from the Commonwealth to fund 4 COVID stimulus projects, in addition to 1.8 million it received in 2021. The total grant for the stimulus projects is $3.3 million. As stated before in the previous report, our estimated unrestricted cash position at the end of 30 June 2022 is $4,713,496. Individual business units, the results are listed in the paper. Just to comment on the major variances. The major material variance in the airport result, approximately 890,000, was largely attributable to the forecasted increase in airport landing fees approved by Council 7th of July 2021. Regarding the liquor and bond electricity variances, which are at this stage 231 and 271,000 reduction in terms of the variance. It's too early in the financial year to predict whether the forecast results are likely to be true indicators of the full year result. So at this stage, yes, they're showing a negative variance, but council, we are confident that they will come in on budget. The projected year-end surplus result is 497,000, which is consistent with the original budget deficit of $500,000 for the financial year. Our immediate need continues to be to restore council's working capital position. As stated earlier, the estimated cash equivalent balance at 30 June 22 will be 4.7 million, representing 59% of the $8 million target. That's the Q1 budget review report, Mr. Interim Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Innes-Walker. It's pleasing that after allowing for the adjustments that are detailed in the report, the council remains on track to produce its predicted budget surplus very close to that $500,000 mark as per the original budget. I understand that we are still to go through the process of identifying the 5% savings and efficiency gains, and that is something that will be coming forward in the next month or two, and that finding those savings and efficiency gains is essential to achieving this $500,000 budget surplus. So that's a process that will roll out for council over the next 1 to 2 months. But having said that, I resolve that 1, council notes the 2021-2022 Q1 budget review statements, income statement and operating forecast, and statement of capital expenditure. 2, council notes that at 30 September 2021, the projected 2021-22 year-end financial result is a $497,225 surplus. 3, council notes that full year capital budget is now forecast to be $8,286,612 against an original budget of $7,187,581. And I will move now to item 11.1. Item 11.1 is a report on the ARFFS update arising from external audit finding number 63. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Interim Administrator. I'll give you a brief update on this report as our manager's off on sick leave today. ARFFS stands for Aviation Rescue Firefighting Services. And this report highlights the fact that we have been in negotiations with the Commonwealth departments to find a more viable method of funding this strategic resource for the island, ensuring that we are maintaining our level of competency for the airport and services to the airline industry. No other local government council funds a fire service that provides both CFS and ARFS capabilities. Hence, we have been speaking with them to find a better funding mechanism. As you can see in the financial implications on page 37, is that our current funding annually is 428,000, of which 365 of this is made up of employee costs. So that's dreadfully inadequate to meet sufficient statutory training requirements or uniforms or PPE or even just simple service maintenance schedules. So that's that. This report is just giving you an update, and it's there for notation.
Thank you. And you'll note that I have participated in discussions with the Commonwealth along with yourself, Mr. General Manager, to initiate some change in this regard. And it's very clear from some of the capital upgrades with ageing fire appliances and other equipment that some fundamental change needs to be taken to council's approach. The fact that we're not part of a network means that it's not possible or feasible for council to have staff interchange from other airports, which might provide some critical mass and economies of scale. So a change to the approach is required. But for now, I resolve that council note the current status of this EAF 63. And I'll move to item 11.2, which is a report on tourism for September 2021. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Interim Administrator. Before you say an update report specifically focused on tourism sales that shows, whilst maybe up on September 2020, remembering that was in the middle of a shutdown of Ireland. If you look at the average that shows there, we are actually down on the average for September for the month. It's got airline statistics which are showing, whilst there's good numbers still coming in from Queensland, we are certainly missing our larger markets of New South Wales and Victoria. And there's a number of other information updates that has happened through social media. I'm happy to take any questions.
No, the negative trends, are clearly the result of border shutdowns, particularly in this case from New South Wales. So whilst the figures are disappointing, they're certainly understandable. And it's to be hoped that things start to recover and get back to as reasonably close to normal as possible as the changes occur that are occurring for November and December with vaccination rates reaching the levels required by government to reopen borders. So I will resolve that the tourism report September 2021 be noted, and I'll move to item 11.3, the economic development section update. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Interim Administrator. Again, there are some additional figures in here for visitations, but also results from the liquor bond. I suppose if you head to page 41, that shows that we're still performing extremely well, if you can call it that. In sales, we see average spend and monthly sales for September are up on every previous years, the four that are shown there. It also shows some statistics around visitation and numbers that are attending carbon museums. Happy to take any questions.
No questions on this report. I resolve that council note the information provided in this report, and I'll move to item 12.1, which is the services update. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Interim Administrator. I suppose the highlights in this report is showing that the roundabout footpath program is completed, and hopefully when you do get to come to Ireland in December, hopefully, if things are open, you'll be able to see some of these things that have changed, and you'll also see an update on the software glitch that we had with the battery there the other month of September, where we've had that rectified, and we're still working on the fix for the Cummins generators, the powerhouse. Still awaiting a review report from the Cummins engineer who visited the island last month.
Thank you. I resolve that council notes the information provided in the report. I'll move to item 13.1, which is the planning and environment update. Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Interim Administrator. I'll ask the Manager of Planning and Environment to give you an update.
Mr. Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Interim Administrator. Before you is a report for the planning and environment area of council for the last month. If I might just point out some highlights of the report. So in our planning and development area, as well as conduct assessment on some 18 consent matters and committed matters in that space. We also worked on a number of government-related DAs. Each of those regarding the NERC waste processing area, the Youngs Road quarry, the relocation of the desalination plant at Cascade, and the proposed temporary landing structure at Cascade Bay as well. In the waste and environment area, you have statistics before you for the month of waste exported is probably the prime number there. We've exported 24.3 tonnes of residual waste for the month, bringing us to 85.3 tonnes for the year to date, which is slightly below what we had budgeted for the year, which is a good outcome. In saying that, we have been stockpiling recycled waste to remain within budget, and are looking for a cheaper rate to export that at a later date, or look for alternative measures to manage that waste in the future. On the topic of closing Headstone waste facility to the public, as you now know, Council has an approved development application for a waste processing area at the drill ground adjacent to the airport runway, and the purpose for that area and a DA is stockpiling builders demolition waste and other bulky items that are currently taken to Headstone, burnt and disposed of in the ocean. In the coming weeks, NERC will move to close that facility to the public, and we'll be asking customers, community members to alternatively bring those waste types to the Waste Management Centre for segregation, for stockpiling, and basically until we find a more appropriate long-term solution for that waste. This is consistent with our objectives for the year to close Headstone to the public. I'll also note that Council, with its application for a $1.4 million grant to the Commonwealth Building Better Regions Fund for a circular economy infrastructure project, was unsuccessful with that grant. That was a very critical component, still is a critical component of modernising our waste management practices on island, including the cessation of trash and disposal of waste at Headstone. Notwithstanding that, Council will continue to work in this space to improve our waste management practices, and where possible, obtain funding for capital improvements to manage waste types, including bulky demolition and construction waste. And we also continue to work with the company Revolve Your World to develop a pilot project primarily for domestic and commercial waste, which will improve Council's ability to recycle waste streams here on island, and thereby reduce our export waste liability and therefore the cost associated with that moving forward, which is an exciting development. And in the coming council meeting, we will bring forward another report with regards to developments with that particular organisation. In the waste space, finally, we have engaged the services of Prince Consulting to help review waste management strategy for Norfolk Island. Anne and her team come with substantial experience in working in remote and regional areas on waste management and has a background in assisting Norfolk Island with its waste solutions since 2000. There are a number of areas that Anne will be reviewing as part of that waste management strategy, which are for you in the report. And we look forward to working with Anne and her team over the coming months, including a visit to Ireland for a couple of people from Anne Prince Consulting, scheduled for late January, early February next year. Our composting facility, I think it's worth noting, is up and running. While there's still capacity for that piece of infrastructure to receive more material, it is producing compost at a far more desirable rate than it has in previous months, and processing butcher's waste, green waste, and the good outcome is that we're now able to sell compost back to the community in accordance with our fees and charges for the financial year. A couple of final points. Our Argentine ant eradication program, the treatment for the season has kicked off with our area of focus Zone 9, the Steels Point area. The Yamaha phaser drone pilot has come to Ireland and commenced that work in the last couple of weeks, which is very exciting, as well as our on-the-ground Argentine ant eradication team conducting ground treatment. There's been a lot of work done by that team as pre-planning with stakeholders, with local community members in that area to make sure that they're aware of the work happening and to prepare them for access required by our ground baiting team and for the work that will be happening with the drain in and around their properties. And to date, that's all been going well. We've had a good window of weather in the last week, which has allowed us to do a complete sweep of Zone 9 with aerial boating, which is a great start. There's also details of the continuation of our environment program across a number of reserves on Ireland. Probably most noteworthy, and may have been mentioned in last month's report, but a community tree planting day on the 26th of September was conducted with around 40 volunteers and the planting of 320 native species at Cockpit Cascade Reserve. There's also been a cattle trough installed in that area to allow continued access for cattle to water while we've excluded cattle from that local creek. And finally, on the 11th of October, as part of the ANH show, members of my staff were part of the release of the native veg mapping project, which was 15 fact sheets and a technical report developed by the Invasive Species Council. That display at the ANH show was very well received by the public, the number of people coming through and asking questions about the mapping, which is ostensibly mapping now of the native vegetation on Ireland and how it would have looked back in 1750. There's some really good information there now available on the council website for community members and others to access if they wish to look at native plantings on their property to that effect.
Excellent.
And that's
Thank
the
you,
report.
Mr.
Happy to take.
Thank you, Mr. Reid, for that very thorough elaboration on your report. Can you tell me the application for funding that we had under Building Better Regions? My understanding is that that application failed largely around the fact we were seeking funding for mobile equipment, which didn't qualify for funding. Are we proposing to package that application up again and apply for funding from a different perspective, or is that just not available to us?
But firstly, we've via email been given information around the ineligibility of that application due to the failing against certain criteria. Our inference is that that is due to the application for mobile plant. We're still awaiting a face-to-face meeting with members of the BBRF team with the department to have that clarified. I'm hoping to have a date scheduled soon on how we would then seek to obtain funding for equipment such as that moving forward. We have a couple of different opportunities. We are talking more directly to the Department of Infrastructure around how funding could be obtained for part, if not all, of what was originally requested as part of the BBRF grant outside of that process, and that's an ongoing conversation with the department. But equally, to your point, yes, as round 6 of infrastructure BBRF grant round opens up, which I believe will be in the new year, 2022, if there's no resolution around obtaining new capital equipment that we had wished to receive, then we would look to amend that application such that it was eligible. And that's why it's important for us to get that clear feedback from the BBRF team on, in fact, what it did fail at in the original grant.
Thank you. And I took your point in relation to the development application that's currently being processed in relation to the use of the drill ground and the importance of that to the closure of the waste disposal facility at Headstone. Can you, do you have a suggested date in mind at this stage for when Headstone will be closed for that purpose?
Officially, the DA takes effect on, I believe, the 15th of this month. So there is a 28-day statutory period after the DA has been approved, like all consent matters on Island. So we're unable to use that area until that time's lapsed. We would aim to have that area used from that date or thereabouts. However, there is some finer detail that we're working through with the operation of the Waste Management Centre itself. It's important to point out, and particularly for people here in the room today, that we won't be asking customers, members of the public, to deliver that waste directly to the drill ground. That waste will be coming to the Waste Management Centre first, like all the other waste that is delivered from customers here on Island currently. So we're just working through the area that would be most suitable for receiving that waste and the process of then taking that waste from there out to the drill ground. We do recognise that is double handling of waste and something that we would prefer to avoid, but at the same time, the drill ground area adjacent to the airport runway is effectively an industrial part of the airport, and it's not appropriate to allow members of the public free access into that area. So the middle of the month is November is when we're aiming for, give or take a few days.
Thank you for that. I resolve that council notes the information provided in the report, and I'll move to item 14.1, which is the customer service area update. Mr. General Manager.
Well, thanks, Interim Administrator. Just while they change the seats, I'll get the Manager of Community Services to address the report.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Mr. Interim Administrator, the report 14.1 is just to give you an update on the services in the customer service area. But probably of note, in the last month, on the 15th of October, the new library opened, and that was made possible by funding under the Economic Stimulus Project from the Commonwealth Government. Since its opening, we've noticed an increase in both visitation and in people visiting and in memberships as well, which is really great. It was a bit of a soft opening, and we're hoping to do a little bit more marketing into the future to increase those numbers so that the space is more readily utilised. I'd just like to, on the library, congratulate and thank and acknowledge all of the tradesmen involved in the build, all of the council staff who worked incredibly hard to make that shift happen. And we had 2 amazing volunteers as well that stepped in at the last minute and gave up their free time to assist in the move. So I would just like to acknowledge their hard work, and the library is a beautiful space. So I'm hoping that it will get a lot of use by the community. One of the developments in the new library, for those listening, that we didn't have in the old library was we have 3 public PCs. So the public are able to go in and access the internet or just use the PC free of charge. Probably one of the next things I'd like to highlight in this report is also a bit of a good news story. The council and the Commonwealth came together to form a partnership in the form of a COVID business grants program. And to date, we have distributed $965,500 into the community through those grants, which I think is really valuable and really important at these times when we are struggling with the downturn in visitors from COVID. So I think that's a really positive partnership between government agencies. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have on the rest of the report.
Thank you, Ms Webb. It's very pleasing to see two really good news stories coming out of your section. Great news on the library, and please add my endorsement to the congratulations that go out to contractors and staff involved in that facility. I can't wait to see it myself when I'm there in December. And also congratulations to all those involved in setting up and processing, setting up the systems and processing the applications for the COVID business grant program. I know that was covered well in the recent edition of the Norfolk Fuss newsletter, and it's great to see the feedback from the community, or from the business community in this case, was very, very positive and appreciative of Council's involvement together with the Commonwealth to make this funding available. So I thank you for that report, and I resolve that Council notes the activities of the customer service areas reported, and I'll move to item 15. There are no notices of motion. Mr. General Manager, is there any urgent business at item 16?
Not this month.
And no confidential matters at item 17. No questions
No.
for the next council meeting. That brings us to the close of the meeting. Is there anything else, Mr. General Manager, before I close the meeting?
No, Mr. Interim Administrator.
Then before I close the meeting, I'll just apologise again for having to conduct this meeting remotely. Again, it's been forced on me due to the border closure arrangements. But we're hoping that'll all be over in time for the next council meeting, which is due in the last week of November, first couple of days of December that week. So having said that, I declare the meeting closed at 2:43 p.m. and thank everybody for attendance.
Thanks, Mike. I'll